Well, welcome to the Helping Families Be Happy podcast, where we explore the often messy world of family love and relationships. I'm your host for this podcast, Christopher Robbins, the co-founder of Familius Publishing, husband, father of 9, author, fly fisherman, backpacker, and aspirational musician based in the Central Valley of California. We hope to bring you nourishing, real-life information about love, family, relationships, and life. Now, today we're welcoming Dr. Frank Sileo. No, Dr. Frank J. Sileo, PhD, is a New Jersey licensed psychologist and the founder and executive director of the Center for Psychological Enhancement in Ridgewood, New Jersey. A Fordham graduate, Dr. Sileo works with children, adolescents, adults, and families. Since 2010, he has been consistently recognized as one of New Jersey's top kids doctors. He is an author of 16 children's picture books, including his best-selling and award-winning book, Sally Sore Loser. His books have been recipients of various prestigious awards and have been translated into foreign languages. He also wrote an award-winning parenting book that deals with raising chronic, medically ill children. Dr. Sileo speaks across the country, published in psychological journals, and is one of the go-to psychologists in the media. Now, to learn more about him, you can go to his website at drfranksileo, FrankSileo.com, and you can follow him on his socials at drfranksileo. Now, today, we have to ask the question, are your children involved in sports? Are your children good sports? Well, today we're discussing sportsmanship as a value for children to learn and how we, as parents, coaches, and teachers, can foster good sportsmanship, particularly relationships after one or both in a relationship. Now, this information shared today aligns with Familius habits, learn together and play together. You can learn more about the Familius 10 Habits of Happy Families by going to the Habit Hub blog on Familius.com. And for the video of this podcast, please go to the Familius YouTube channel. Well, Dr. Sileo, and should I call you Frank or should I say Dr. Sileo?
Frank is fine. Thank you.
Well, welcome, and we're thrilled that you can join us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. In fact, I'm thinking this topic embraces 5 of your habits of healthy families. Play together, talk together, learn together, laugh together, and work together.
Well, we love the laugh together because that's really important. Now, I grew up playing sports, and my kids grew up playing sports, and I can tell you there have been experiences where I have watched not just the children, but the parents just be out of control as when they don't like something that happened. So let's talk about sportsmanship. Let's start with this question. How can parents, coaches, teachers help foster good sportsmanship?
I think you raise a very excellent point about the parents, because I think we need to look in the mirror. And I think we need, as parents, as caregivers of kids, that we need to model good sportsmanship, and not just parents, coaches, and other spectators to model good sportsmanship. We have to be a good spectator and sometimes not yell out from the sideline and yell out and be the kind of auxiliary coach. I don't think that, I don't think it helps our kids. I think we need to be aware of not living through our kids. Maybe we were the frustrated baseball player or the frustrated dancer, because sportsmanship isn't just about sports. It's also for kids who do dance or theater or other kinds of things, play musical instruments, because sportsmanship can be involved in those arenas as well. And I think it's important that we, as parents and as caregivers, that we encourage positive sayings to our kids, like good job, good game. In my book, Sally Sore Loser, the main motto in the book is, you've won if you've had fun. And I think that sometimes, I don't know what it's like where you are, but certainly here in the Northeast in New Jersey, sometimes it's all about the winning. And I think sometimes we forget about the fun aspect of sports and dance and theater and those kinds of activities for kids. So we start with ourselves. We are their role models.
Okay. So we have to be good spectators. We have to be good sport. We have to exemplify and model good behavior. And I like what you said, that we can't vicariously live again through our children's sports because we didn't win the state championship and we should have had another second chance. We have to let them play. Now, let's just go back a little bit and just talk about competition. How does competition impact a kid's ability to develop empathy and teamwork. But it seems like sports are a unique area that they can learn so much in, particularly team sports.
Yes. Competition can both support and challenge a child's ability to develop empathy and teamwork. And that depends largely on how it's framed by the adults involved, parents, coaches, teachers. And I think the positive impact of competition is that healthy competition can actually strengthen empathy and teamwork when kids are encouraged to support their teammates, recognize the efforts in other kids, and show respect to the opponents. It can help them understand different perspective, what it's like to feel to win, what's it like to feel to lose, and watch others go through both. Working toward a shared goal in team sports helps kids learn how to rely on others, communicate with others, and celebrate group success, which are all building blocks of empathy. The potential challenges of this is when the overemphasis is on winning or individual achievement can lead to comparison amongst kids, jealousy amongst kids, and even bullying.
So I really liked, who was that very famous basketball coach of the UCLA Bruins in the 60s and 70s, John Wooden. And I really loved what he had to say is that you were only competing with yourself. He said he never wanted to win. He never focused on his team to win. He wanted them to maximize their performance. And it just so happened that if they did maximize their performance, they more often than not lost. But they weren't competing against another person, just trying to be the best they could be. And I think that's a great advice from a world-class coach. Now, I remember, and I don't know if you're a fan. You might be a Jets fan, which would be really hard if you're a Jets fan. It's probably only worse if you're a Raiders fan. But I remember the Super Bowl one year when Tom Brady and the Patriots actually lost a Super Bowl, which was rare, right? I think he went
Very
to
rare.
9 and they won 6. Well, I remember after the Super Bowl, his son was weeping, and they had him on camera. And his then wife, Giselle, who was a supermodel from Brazil,
Right.
she said, sometimes the other team has to win. And so let's talk about, well, how can we help children lose gracefully in a culture that really emphasizes winning over anything else?
Right. I think that, this is we're a culture of results, not necessarily of process. We don't like, getting to that. We don't focus on the steps needed to be successful or to learn a skill. It's always on the end result. And we need to kind of shift our focus a little bit on that. But I think we need to redefine what success is. Shift the focus from winning to growth. Maybe you might ask your kids questions like, what did you learn today? Or did you try your best? Or tell me a good moment, even if the score didn't go your way. This helps them see value beyond the scoreboard. Again, focusing on the results. You got a home run or we got a goal or whatever. We as adults set the tone. So if a parent or coach reacts to a loss with anger or blame, kids internalize that. But if they see a calm perspective and even humor after a tough loss, they learn to do the same. I mean, no one likes to lose. I mean, that's a human thing. We all want to win at some aspect, whether it be at a game, a football game, or whether it be a game of checkers, or getting the lead in the school play, or getting picked to be front in line in a dance recital. I think we need to also normalize, failure in some respect. Remind kids and show them through stories and examples that even top athletes lose and often learn their biggest lessons from those losses. And I think we can use the media in that regard through movies or even watching TV. Right now, the US Open is happening. And it's like we can use, if we're watching these events with our kids, these are great opportunities to talk with our kids about losing, winning, et cetera, and see, which coaches, which players are displaying either good losing or, even good winning. My book on Sally's Sore Losers, not just on focusing on teaching kids not to be a sore loser, but it's also to teach them not to be a sore winner who's bragging all the time or taunting kids all the time. So I think we need to normalize failure, and then we celebrate effort and sportsmanship. Cheer as loudly as you want for great teamwork and hustling and fair play, as you would for winning a goal or hitting a home run. That tells kids that those things matter as well, and gives kids space to feel. I think, losing hurts. we've all lost in our lives. And I think I think this is why it's so important to teach kids sportsmanship at a very young age, because we don't always grow up to buy the house we want. We don't always get accepted to the college of our choice. We don't always, bid on the house and get it, or, whatever. We don't, or marry the person we fell in love with. So I think losing hurts, and let kids feel disappointing, who feel disappointed, without rushing them past it, certainly without name calling, like, don't be a sissy, or don't be a crybaby, or don't be this. Then when the moment's right, help them to reflect constructively on what maybe happened in the game, or what happened for their performance. But ultimately, if kids feel seen, valued, and supported, regardless of the outcome, they'll be more likely to handle losses with grace and bounce back stronger. And again, that's why I think, one of my thoughts is that sportsmanship really needs to be taught early in their life, because it lays the foundation for how they treat others, not just on the field or on the stage or in the orchestra, but beyond that.
Okay. So, I have this daughter. I have 9 kids, as you know. My 8th child is a highly competitive daughter, and she loves games. And so she loves card games, and she's very good at them. So she and I will sit down and we'll play. And if I win, there have been times where she literally will weep. And so now let's role play. So help me, as someone who's experienced this, help me know how, if we have a child that is, maybe he's angry, maybe she's taunting, maybe she's crying, maybe she's just so frustrated. Help us understand, with an example, how do we communicate more effectively and help our children?
I think, the first step is to be proactive. If you know your kids best, and anyone listening knows their kids better than anybody. And I think it's really important that if you have a child who has a proclivity toward, not losing gracefully, or being a sore winner, I think it's important to have that conversation before the game begins, as opposed as being proactive versus reactive to the situation, because we know our kids might have a meltdown over this or become dysregulated. And so I think it's important to have a conversation with your daughter, or anyone listening to this, to have that conversation beforehand. And then maybe at times, when a child becomes dysregulated, and this goes with lots of issues that kids who struggle with emotional dysregulation, is maybe taking a pause in the game and talking to them about, let's take a break, let's take a breath, let's teaching them some coping skills at that moment. Sometimes that works beautifully. And sometimes, the pieces of the board game are going flying across the room. And so I think that, it's so important for parents to, try teaching this early and at home, so that when they're out in the community or at school or in gym class or whatever, that they're not dysregulating there. Because I think that when we lay the foundation early on, it helps build their character and their respect. Learning to win humbly and lose graciously teaches kids to respect others, whether they're teammates, opponents, or referees. And as I said earlier, it also encourages emotional regulation. It helps kids manage frustration, disappointment, and excitement in healthy ways. Skills that will go beyond sports and beyond the stage or beyond the music lesson. So I think that, is the issue sportsmanship, or is the issue low frustration tolerance, or, not learning how to use their words? I mean, we always say to kids, use your words, use your words. But I always say to parents, they may not know the words to say. They don't know how to express. Everything gets thrown into the anger bucket. And sometimes there's gradients of anger. And we all know this even as adults, right? Like, we're frustrated, we're disappointed, we're annoyed. Yes, they're kind of under the umbrella, perhaps, of anger, but to teach them those skills so that when they're maybe hijacked by that emotion of losing a game, kind of enacting some of those skills and some of those words that might be help promote more healthy expression of disappointment or anger or frustration.
Okay, this is very, very helpful. Now, it's pretty clear to us, I believe, when a child or a parent is really struggling with their anger issues, or being a sore loser, that parent that just is continually to scream at the umpire or the referee, the child who's, kicking the game across the room. I mean, those are pretty obvious. But are there other signs that we should be aware of when our children are struggling with competition, and to know how we should then, respond as parents, coaches, and teachers?
Yes, good question. I think that, they may experience anxiety before games or practices or rehearsals. They might complain of stomach aches or headaches or asking to skip practices. They might have trouble sleeping the night before a game or before a performance of some way. Again, kids don't always tell us, they show us. And so we need to pay attention to their behavior, because their behavior is speaking volumes. And so, a kid who maybe normally was very enthusiastic to go to practice and all of a sudden is appearing withdrawn, they might be struggling in some respect. So again, to those listening, I think it's really important to not only listen to what our kids are saying, but also watch how they're behaving. Okay. Common signs also of that kids struggling with competition or losing is that, meltdowns and crying or anger that feels disproportionate to the situation. They engage in a lot of blaming behavior, blaming others or quitting mid-game or refusing to talk after a loss or saying to the other team, good game, and giving them high fives. A lot of kids struggling with competition also may struggle with perfectionism or fear of making mistakes. Maybe your child is, hesitating to try new things during games because they're just anxious about it, or they're constantly apologizing, or they're beating themselves up over minor errors. But I think you made an excellent point, Christopher, that again, we need to look in the mirror as the adults in the room and say, how are we handling the anger? How are we dealing with competition? Are we sending messaging to our children that might lead an expectation? They did a longitudinal study many years ago where they asked kids to remember their least favorite activity with their parents, excuse me. And most kids reported that it was after a game that kids regretted and hated the most of their childhood memories. Why? Because the drive home was grilling, it was criticism, it was not supportive, it might have been belittling others, it might have been belittling other kids, it might have been belittling the coach, it might have been belittling the umpires. And so that speaks volumes that kids, when they reflect back, and I asked many of my patients that question, and many of my kids who are struggling with sportsmanship, they actually don't like when their parents come to their games sometimes, because they feel, or if their dads or moms coach them, because they feel like sometimes their parents are harder on them. And so, kids struggle, when kids are struggling with competition, they tend to not take joy in what they used to do. Like, they don't want to play anymore. It's not fun. They don't want to go to those things anymore. They seem disconnected from the sport that they once loved. Again, those signs may not be in words, they may be in action. So pay attention to how our kids are behaving. I mean, as I said, we want to listen to what they're saying, but we also want to watch them and how they're behaving and saying, what's going on here? Is there something, is that a clue to something going on with my child?
Now, I was reading an article just yesterday about the Kansas City Chiefs head coach, Andy Reid, who has led his team to 5 of the last 6 Super Bowls. Also at Philadelphia did the same thing. And he said that he doesn't ever read any of the commentary about his team and doesn't worry about what people have to say, because he said, there's no fun in that. We're out to play a game. We just want to play a game.
Right.
That's
right.
good to remember that there's a lot of money in some of these businesses
Yes.
that are sports. They're still playing a game. And I love it when these adult athletes just show how much fun they're having in playing a game. Now, are there any resources that you could direct us to that might help us as we identify that our children and ourselves might need to improve in our examples?
I mean, I think that, hopefully people will look into my book, Sally's Sore Loser, and use that as a tool for conversations. Lots of my books that I write for kids, there's usually a note in the back, note to parents and caregivers on how to use the book and how to foster the skill that's in this book. And so in the back of Sally's Sore Loser, there's tips on how parents can foster sportsmanship in their children. And, I think that as the best, I think the best resource, is our relationship with our kids. using that to get them to open the door for conversations about things. Um, you know, you know, I talk to kids all the time, and like, some of them are on behavior management systems and things like that. And the best reward that they look forward to is spending time with their mom or their dad or a grandparent. They love all that stuff. And I think we have to, as parents and caregivers, we need to ask open-ended questions, non-judgmental questions like, how did you feel today? Or what was the hardest part of the game for you? Or tell me something good that happened, or tell me something that wasn't so good. And again, maybe you want to temper these questions not directly after the game, especially if the game didn't go so well, because you may close the child up and they don't want to start talking to you about it. And I think, as far as other resources, there's other kids' books out there on sportsmanship. And I think that, again, as I stated earlier, start talking about these things at a young age. And again, it's not always about sports. It could be other activities that your kids are involved in, and that kind of engender, empathy and competition and, healthy ways and team efforts and working together. Like your habits of healthy families is like, if this isn't fun, why are we doing this? I mean, I played baseball and I was a wrestler and I played some basketball. And, when I was growing up, now I sound old when I'm saying this now, is that there was like one team in one season. Now, at least here in New Jersey, and I'm sure it's elsewhere, there's like, it never stops. And there's multiple teams, there's travel teams, and there's A and B teams and C teams, which I have a hard time with sometimes, because how do the kids feel about, not being, commingled with the other kids, kind of almost like segregated from the better players. As a culture too, we also, we're very into giving a trophy for everything. And, they become awards of participation instead of, for merit. And, we're so worried about kids' self-esteem. And, that's a concern that we always need to take into account. But I don't know if we're helping kids' self-esteem by giving them an award just because they participated and so that they don't feel bad about themselves. I think they need to talk to their parents about that and talk to their coaches about, losing and how could they improve their skills?
Right. We all need to learn to be more self-reliant. So, okay, now before we close, if my memory is right, that you have contracted a new book with Familius that will be coming out in the future. Just tell us, just briefly, what will this book be?
I'm really excited to be publishing with Familius, and this book I'm very excited about because it's very personal for me. It's called Meatball Sunday, and it's a story about a grandson and a grandmother, and he wants to learn how to make her meatballs. And it talks about food, family, and tradition, something that I was very close to my grandmother growing up. She lived to 101, and I have such fond memories of my grandmother. And this is sort of a love book toward her and what family is. And in the book, she teaches Marco, her grandson, how to make the meatballs by comparing the ingredients to family, such as, the three kinds of meats that you make meatballs with blend together like we come all together as a family. And then Marco wants to surprise grandma with making the meatballs, but he forgets the recipe. So I'll leave that cliffhanger like, will he figure out how to make the meatballs for grandma and to make her proud that he learned how to make her meatballs?
Well, we look forward to that. Now, before we leave, can you remind us, Frank, where our guests can find you online?
So my website is drfranksileo.com, where you can find all my books and you can order them through there, and some media stuff there and some resources for you. And on my socials, Instagram, X, Facebook, it's at Dr. Frank Sileo. Kind of all my social media platforms are Dr. Frank Sileo. So it makes it easy for people.
Great. Well, thank you. It's great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
As we conclude today's podcast, I'd like to thank Familius for its support in bringing the podcast to your ears and your heart. We'd be thrilled if you subscribed to the podcast and left a review. And when you're ready for that next amazing book adventure, we'd be honored if you chose a book from Familius. One step at a time, one great game at a time, we can make the world a happier place.